Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Josh Emeter. I am the Solar PV Program Manager at Oncor. And today we're going to speak a little bit about the program, what we look for, how we incentivize solar installations. And like Jordan said at the end, if you have any questions, I'll be more than happy to answer them. Thank you. So, the program definition, we're going to start with what is the Oncor Solar PV Standard Offer Program. So this is a program that offers financial incentives for the installation of eligible distributed solar energy. So this is the PV panels that are installed on residences, the inverters, and we look to incentivize the installation of these materials. It is open to all eligible residential and commercial Oncor customers. And this means if you have an Oncor meter on your residence, on your business, you are an Oncor customer in that case. And so this includes residencies, businesses, government, educational, nonprofit, and religious facilities. So if you own any facility that has an Oncor meter, that's residential, commercial, you are eligible for Oncor incentives. Our program complies with the Public Utility Commission of Texas, PUC, which is the regulating body for utilities in Texas. And we follow the Texas TRM, which is how we get the generalized calculations used for savings. The program typically runs from, I would say, late January to November 30th. Okay, we usually have a conversation the previous year in December on when we would like to start. And we typically select late January where we kick off the program and we end November 30th. This program has been in existence since 2013 in the Oncor service territory. Every year it does change, whether we're changing our eligibility criteria, the incentives we provide, we're always looking to improve. So the purpose of this program is first to achieve regulatory goals by incentivizing solar PV systems. So solar has always been an expensive enterprise for many, especially early on. And most times, in order to bridge the gap of actually getting a customer to get solar, the best way was to incentivize it. And so the government provided tax credits, and then our utility also offered solar incentives. And this helped for the increase in solar installations in our service territory. The incentives help offset the initial investment cost. This helps the customers make that decision to go solar because now they feel they can afford it. And so it is also to encourage participation by a wide range of service providers. So Texas has quite a few solar installers, and joining this program and participating in it actually helps their business, helps them get their name out there. And if you're an Oncor approved solar installer, you're more likely to get customers in our service territory. So it also promotes participation. Here we're going to talk about how the program is implemented. So how are the incentives offered? So we offer the incentives to qualifying service providers and self-sponsors. So this service providers are our solar installers, and we have a range of qualifications they have to pass in terms of licenses they have to have. And based on this, we then qualify this installer, and they serve as the means of communication between us at Oncor and the customer. So as you can see, Oncor does not work directly with customers. We work through your service provider to provide the incentives. Each service provider has the same restriction to the incentive budget. So every year we roll out a budget, and each installer who is participating has the same restrictions, same violations, just for everything to be fair. It does not matter how big you are. We treat everyone the same in terms of the budget. If you're able to bring in valuable projects, as many as possible, you have the same restrictions as someone who's bringing in one or two. And so a lot of people are curious how the customers can get an estimate of the incentive. Well, like I said, we work directly with your service providers. And so they are provided an Oncor Solar PV estimate calculator. This calculator allows your installer to put in the variables of your residence, everything needed for your project in order to get a good estimate of what your incentive might be. The key word there is estimate, meaning whatever is brought to you might not end up being what you get, but it will be it will be around the same amount. So how do we reach these calculations? Solar PV system incentive values are calculated based on the annual energy and peak demand alternating current. We usually use the NREL PV Watt tool to help us with this calculation. And these incentives are based on the size of your system, the azimuth, the location of the project, shading, and other factors. And so on our system, all these variables have numbers that can be entered, and this gives us an incentive calculation.
Josh, can you tell us what azimuth is?
So the azimuth is where the sun is facing based on where you're installing your solar PV. So we have east-facing systems, we have south-facing systems, we have west-facing systems. We usually encourage a south-facing system because that is where you can account for a large portion of the day where your solar panel will get the best amount of sunlight. So a south-facing system can be regarded as a 180-degree azimuth. So this is one of the factors that contributes to how high your incentive is. If you have a good south-facing system, then based on all other things being equal, your incentive is a little bit more likely to be higher than a west-facing system, for instance. I hope that answers that question, Georgianne.
Yes, thank you.
No problem. So service provider qualification. And as I said earlier, for this program, service providers are regarded as solar installers. So a service provider is a solar installer or a self-sponsor in commercial or retail. And for our program, whoever signs up for the program and states with all their insurances and their licenses that they are going to be representing a customer in which they've submitted a project, we regard that entity as a service provider, meaning we will only deal with that entity for that project. That service provider could have subcontractors who do the electric work, do different things. But as a whole, we are dealing with that entity when it comes to those projects, meaning if there's a problem with installation where the customer is not happy with something, even if it's the subcontractor, we are going to deal with and penalize the service provider. So whoever registers with us is regarded as a service provider, meaning the incentive checks are also only sent to the service provider, no one else. The service provider, like we said, is the communication body between us and the customer. And so the checks are sent to the service provider, the incentive checks, and they're now from there transferred to the customer in whatever deal the service provider and the customer have. So I'm going to list a few requirements that we have to qualify a service provider is fit enough to participate in the solar PV program. So a service provider must have an electrical contractor's license or a master's electrician's license. The service provider must identify if affiliated with other service providers. So in our program, we're going to have a large number of service providers. And if you are affiliated with another one in any instance, you must let me know. We do this to provide fairness, because one of the reasons we do this is you could have a single service provider who has 6 other service providers acting in the same program, meaning they would have 6 more, have access to the budget 6 more times than another service provider. So we want this information. And so if you're a service provider, you need to let us know all the other service providers affiliated with you. You must update your profile. If you're an existing service provider who participated in previous years, you have to update your profile every year. We do this to ensure you have the latest licenses and insurances. If you're a new provider, you must also demonstrate the ability to successfully meet program requirements and meet deadlines. Your participation in future programs heavily depends on this. And you must be currently eligible to participate in Oncor energy efficiency programs. So this is where we have a large range of eligibility criteria to qualify for the incentives, for the project to qualify, for the customer to qualify. And the first one, like I listed earlier, was you must be an Oncor customer, meaning you are served by Oncor, you have an Oncor meter. Your site must contribute to the Energy Efficiency Cost Recovery Fund, which is always part of your bill if you're an Oncor customer. Your system must be new, okay? We do not incentivize pre-existing systems. So if you already have solar installed and then you find out about our program and you want incentives, unfortunately, you do not qualify. It has to be a new system being installed in your residence or your business. New home construction projects are not eligible, meaning if you do not already have a residence or permanent meter, you do not qualify. Okay. The site is not located in a community or development classified as a solar or renewable energy community. So what this means is if you're living in an estate or an area or where homeowners associations or developers have been encouraging solar, then you do not qualify because we do not see our incentives as the reason you are planning on going solar. By being in those communities, your goal and the plan was always to go solar. Our incentives are to help people who are trying to make that decision to go solar and who can't afford it. You must use, and this is very important for customers, you must use an Oncor approved installer. And here I provide the link where you can find Oncor approved installers. You can always find someone or get an installer of your choice to try and register to become an Oncor approved installer, but we will not give any customer incentives to any installer who is not participating in the program or is approved by Oncor. The solar PV system must be interconnected to the grid through an Oncor permanent meter. So any system must be interconnected. The residential system is installed by an approved participating service provider in the program. Why this is important is a lot of people do believe they can install their systems themselves. For safety concerns and for participation reasons, we only allow and grant incentives if you're a residential owner and you also are a service provider that has been approved by Oncor. We do not give incentives for homeowners installing on their homes. This is very important. System must be installed during the program production period, meaning from the moment your installer submits the project for incentives. We believe at this point you have not started installation. So at this point, your program still qualifies. If you have installed prior to submitting this for incentives, you do not qualify. And if you've installed after, you also do not qualify. It must be within the program production period. So for 2021, and like I said, every year is a little bit different. Sometimes we change the eligibility criteria. For residential, the minimum system size we allow for 2021 is 1 kWdc. No project under 1 kWdc qualifies for incentives. The maximum for this year is 15 kWdc. Any residential project found above 15 kWdc will not be eligible for incentives. For commercial, you cannot submit a system that is less than 5 kWdc. And you cannot submit a system that is larger than 300 kWdc or 75% of the peak demand of that location. What this means is we check the annual peak in commercial locations. If your annual peak, which most of the time is around July or August, is more than 75%, if what you're installing is more than 75% of that peak, it does not qualify. Now, for each program year, this can change, but for 2021, a single service provider has a cap on how many projects it can submit at once. The first is a residential cap, which is 5 projects. You can only submit 5 projects at once. This is to prevent large installers taking all the incentives at once. We do not want a single installer to come in, submit 40 projects or 50 projects because they have the means to quickly install, which removes all sorts of competition. So we have this limit per project to give everyone a fair chance. And it is also 5 projects for commercial. So currently we are doing a solar PV plus energy storage program test launch. Now, as you can see in the graph over here, we have our numbers of a total solar installations over the last 4 years. And in orange, you can see the systems that were installed with battery backup. Now, Oncor is testing out this launch in order to see what a transition of the residential solar PV program would look like when we include battery backup as a qualifier. We started this test in September 1st with limited budgets, just in order for us to see how the launch would go, how it would be received. And the major goal of this launch is to follow the market trend and test the battery measure coupled with solar PV. And we also do it right now to obtain data. And this data would help us understand how we could potentially develop a program that could better optimize the use of distributed generation in Oncor service territory. So the goal is to provide better means in order to have distributed generation in the Oncor service territory, and to also match the trend in our Oncor service territory. So more information on the program. We have electronic signatures that must be signed. And these are contracts and agreements between Oncor, some are between Oncor and the service provider, and some are between all three parties, which is Oncor, the service provider, and the customer. The host customer agreement is basically the customer, Oncor, and the service provider agreeing to terms, and the installation notice is Oncor letting the customer know that there's the agreed service provider will come and install, and Oncor has the right to come and make sure that they, as an inspection, they did install what they said they were going to install. So these are all necessary to get the solar incentive. Like I stated earlier, new construction is not allowed in this program. You must have an Oncor permanent meter in order to qualify for solar incentives. So the retail electric provider plays an important part in the incentives. Why we want to make sure people understand the difference between our solar incentives and how they could get credit for their solar or buybacks. If you have questions or if you ever need to understand more in terms of how you can get credit from solar, it is a question for your electric retail provider and not Oncor. Oncor's job is to read the meter and send that information to your electric retail provider, who, if they have a solar plan, will tell you how much you get in credits or what you can do for buybacks. But Oncor is not associated with buybacks or electric credit. And so the realistic expectations is what we tell the service providers, where we want to make sure people understand what solar actually does and what you can actually expect to get out of owning a solar system. I know there are so many ads that will tell you your bill becomes $0 automatically. And we like to tell our service providers to be very honest in what the customer can expect. So here are some quick links, information on residential solar PV program. We have our website, which is called Take a Load Off Texas. This link takes you directly to the residential solar page. The link to the commercial solar page is also present. For information about interconnection, we have that here. If you want to learn more about the PUC, we have that information here. And the PV watts, which is the tool we use to calculate electrical production using solar, we have that link over here also. So I'm going to talk a little bit about inspections now. So a major confusion point sometimes is what type of inspection we do on our side for the solar incentives. There are two separate inspections. For solar incentives, we have an on-site inspection and a desk review. So what we're checking is your installer actually installed what they submitted to us. So in big projects or some projects where the information sent to us is not as clear, our inspector would go over there and check these measures, make sure that the panel is what the installer said it was. And then for projects that are properly submitted and the inspector deems as an easy way to check, we do desk reviews. So another inspection or form of inspection that people often confuse with incentives is remastering the meter. turning on the meter. So whenever you have a solar PV system, Oncor has to come associate that meter with your residence and your new solar system, and have the grid recognize them as an entity. This is different from solar incentives. Okay, and we want to clarify this because a lot of times all we need for incentives are just, I'm going to go into that next, are just basic things, but we do not need to remaster your meter. That is that is the distributed generation team at Oncor. So what does the inspector check for solar incentives? Our inspector makes certain the system is new. Our inspector verifies the solar array azimuth is between 90 to 270 degrees. Like I mentioned earlier, we have 90, 180, 270. We have the range in between them, the best usually being 180 degrees. But anything outside 90 to 270 is not a good fit in terms of electrical production most of the time, and we do not offer incentives because we are offering incentives for the best electrical production that your system can provide. The inspector also checks the panel model and the inverter model just to make sure it is consistent with what was submitted in terms of the wattage. The tilt angle is important in how much sunlight capacity is able to be collected. Usually 15 degrees above a plane line is usually encouraged, but based on what mounting system you use or your location, your tilt enables you to have the best electrical production possible. The shading and other factors altering the sunlight view. So for instance, we want to know if there's trees blocking you, buildings blocking you, if your system has a risk of being covered with debris, snow. These things affect how much sunlight can be collected by the panel. So these are things our inspector checks the mounting type, make sure everything's safely handled. It's not, someone can go over there and trip. The customer has a way of not, stepping on a line or affecting the solar production. Our inspector checks all these things and makes sure that everything is in compliance with the National Electric Code. So here are some pictures of what we encourage our service providers to send us in terms of if we're doing desk reviews. These are some pictures of solar arrays on some residences. As you can see, some systems are facing south, west, east, which detects what azimuth they will be on. Here we have a picture of a ground mount. So this is a solar system, a solar PV system that's been mounted on the ground to be able, the installer felt that this would be the best grounding system for this project. So this is an example of what a ground mount would look like. So during our inspections, these are examples of the type of pictures we expect from our installers. At the left photo is a picture of an inverter, which shows the model number and the manufacturer. We must be clearly able to see this from the picture. And the right shows the back of the module, which shows the model number, the amount of wattage, and the manufacturer. So these are things that we look at when we're looking at desk reviews. So here is my contact information. If you have any questions on the program, you want to reach me. If you have any questions on this presentation, you can reach me on here. We have the inspector's phone number also here. This is usually for installers if they need to ask questions to the inspector of what he's expecting, what type of photos. You can reach him on here. And this is our help desk. In case you cannot reach me and you have questions, please feel free to reach out to our EPM help desk. And thank you very much for listening in on this program. And please, like Georgianne stated earlier, if you have any questions, let me know.
We do have some questions, and I'm going to ask Faye to ask some questions to you out of our Q&A box, but I'm also going to ask Sonia to check the chat and to put in a link in the chat to the evaluation form. So Sonia, take it away. I mean, Faye, take it away.
Absolutely. Hello, everyone. And I'm sorry, I don't think my video is working, but I will go ahead and ask those questions. So the first question is, why has Oncor reduced the total amount of incentives offered over the past couple of years?
So we have different programs here at Oncor, and based on the demand and what we are trying to promote, we have different incentives distributed for our solar programs, for our lighting programs, and it is a collective decision with management how much incentives should be offered for each program. And so solar has always been a program where management usually make the decision of how much they believe should be offered in that particular program year. And so this factors in to how much is usually allowed for a particular program year.
So Josh, I have a follow-up question to that, because it seemed to me like in the past, the state of Texas allocated money to these incentives. Am I remembering that incorrectly, or does that still happen also?
The state of Texas allocated money for these incentives?
Uh-huh.
So
I thought the state of Texas played a role in determining these incentives. I thought the state.
So it is, if you're alluding to tax credits, so that would be a different form of incentives. You know, our funds come from the customer. You know, if you're participating in, if you're an Oncor customer, there's a portion of your bill that goes into energy efficiency. And so this is used to generate these incentives.
Okay.
So you were basically giving back.
Okay, wonderful. Faye, did you have any other questions?
Yes. So the next question is, does the Oncor incentive program make participants eligible for the solar investment tax credit?
No, so that is different. So you would need to, they have different requirements, and your solar installer will brief you on that on your choice, because that is a separate incentive. We have our own requirements and they have theirs. There might be some that are aligned, but your solar installer of choice will brief you on what you need for that incentive and what you need for our incentive, but it is different.
Thank you. And if you don't mind, I have a question that I'd like to ask.
Sure.
So is it true that Texas is #2 in solar use as far as, in the United States? And if that is true, how are we close to being #1 in the States?
I wish I could answer that for sure. I know Texas's solar market is growing very much, and we're definitely one of the top dogs in the country, but I can't tell you we're #2 on how close we are to being #1.
Thank you.
I also have a question. Do you have an incentive program, a solar incentive program for any apartment complexes? I was just, interested to know if you had a program. And if you do, has it been affected?
That's a very good question. So we don't, because our project, the way our project works is per meter. So one project is seen as 1 meter. And so apartment complexes are multiple meters serving a room or an apartment, like you said. So we don't have a program for that because we would almost be creating a separate uh, solar city just for that apartment. So we deal with projects as the way we deal with 1 meter. And so, for example, a house would be one project. Um, a large corporation would be one project. It just depends on you having 1 meter. So we don't have an incentive program for apartment complexes.
Thank you.
I think we've had another question come in. It's from a person who actually installs solar, and it says, we've seen some installs in direct shade. How are these installs able to pass Encor's inspection?
So we have a limit also, but I review these projects, and we, in order to pass the first initial application for a project, you have to submit a shading report, a shading analysis, in which I will look at it, and based on how much shading that project might have, your project either will be denied, or we will encourage you to maybe install the PV system in a different location around the residence where it is not too impacted by shading. So if maybe you're on the, east, you have an east facing system and you have multiple trees um, in the east side of the residence, then we would encourage you to see if you could get it to the west. If the entire area is just a poor shading residence or business, then that project might not qualify, because our goal is to get the best production from each system.
Okay, thank you, Josh. I'm looking here, and it looks like we've had some comments come through on the chat, and that is, are there other incentives and can they be stacked?
And can they be stacked? So do you mean, for instance, we definitely have other incentives. We have for HVAC, we have for lighting, and I would encourage everybody on here to go to our website, take a look of Texas, and you will be able to find multiple incentive options. Oncor offers numerous amount of incentives for different measures. Solar PV is just one of many. So I would definitely encourage everyone on here to go on those websites. And if you, by stacking, if you mean, can you do multiple at once? Yes, you absolutely can. Solar PV incentives is different from lighting. So if your business is looking at lighting incentives and you also want to do solar, you could definitely do them separately. Or if you're a resident owner and you want to have HVAC, a better HVAC system installed, then you definitely can do that and get solar. So we do not limit the amount of incentives you can get per program.
Thank you. And I just put that Take a Load Off Texas website in the chat for people to see.
Great.
And then here's another question. Is the information in this presentation different than that posted in the Energy Efficiency Contractor portal? Or do you recommend this website for technically savvy customers? And it's got a eepm.oncor.com residential is that web address.
So the information is not different, but the information on there could be more granular. And because the information on there most of the time is geared for service providers who have been accepted or are trying to participate in this program. So we usually give different types of information to service providers in terms of what they cannot do, and information, because they have more knowledge on solar. They are the installers. So the information that we give them is more in depth than what we give customers, as we deal mostly with service providers. But overall, it's the same information.
So, Sonia, Faye, I'm going to ask if you guys see any more question or chat comments. Oh, wait, I do see something here. Did anybody ask about current incentive status wait list, and if it is closed and when it ran out of funds? So basically the whole thing about, you know, what is the status of, and what kind of wait list do you have, and when do you typically run out of funds?
So it really depends on the program year. I'm assuming whoever asked this question has participated or knows a little bit more about the program. If you're speaking about the current year, we're still active, we're still moving. Unless I can confirm you're a solar installer in our program, I cannot give you the exact details of what is available, but our program is still running. And if you have any projects, you can contact me directly and we can work on it and see if it qualifies for the rest of the year. For anyone who's not part of the program, waitlist projects are projects that submitted after all the funds ran out. So we put them on the wait list in case a project cancels or we get more funds. And so whenever the project budget runs out and more people have projects, our wait list gets opened and stacked up. And whenever a project cancels, whoever's first on the wait list gets released from the wait list, or we have more incentives from management, we release as many projects as we can. So that is what the wait list means.
Thank you so much, Josh. And Sonia, I just want to ask again, have you been able to put the evaluation link in chat for everybody?
Yes, I have. So I just encourage everyone to please complete that survey. It does help us to improve, make the improvements on our sustainable webinar presentation. So please, we encourage you to complete that survey after this session.
Okay.
Thank you.
And you know what? We've had one more question come in, and Sonia, I'm just going to say that I don't see that in my chat, so I'm wondering if maybe you sent it to just the panelists rather than everyone. So if you don't mind, if you will put that evaluation link in the chat to everyone again. And I'm going to go back and ask this question. Oh wait, I do see it now. I do see it now.
It's there.
Yeah,
yes.
But if you'll go ahead so they don't have to scroll through and put it in again. And here is the last question I saw. It was, my apologies for arriving late, and if I'm asking a question that was already asked, that's okay. Do we anticipate the incentive programming continuing in 2022? And you were just talking about all that, but specifically, do you expect it's going to continue in 2022?
So with solar PV, the solar PV residential program, what usually happens is come December, we review how the current year worked, how things we want to change, if we want to bring it back. So I cannot answer that question now, but from my standpoint, I do believe it should be returning, but I cannot guarantee that. You will be able to know where we are with the program, the changes during our kickoff or at the end of December when we send out save the date to everyone who wants to participate. You will get every information about the 2022 program.
Okay. Well, Tom, thank you again. We appreciate you joining us today, and thank you for allowing us to publish this on our website. And we look forward to having you back in the future and some of your colleagues who can talk about other programs that you may have. So thank you. Thank you.